We're here today speaking with Mr. Mike Matlock, Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Meridium, and Mr. Ben Snyman, Senior Vice President of Joy Global Services. Welcome, gentlemen.
Glad to be with you.
Pleasure to have you here today. Digital transformation will require greater connectivity and more data sources, utilizing service buses and platforms. How is Meridium facilitating the need for this connectivity and integration of disparate data sets?
Paula, that's a great question. For many years, Meridium has been an expert in integration and looking at different interfaces to different data sets, whether it's your ERP systems or whether to process historians, even machine as a part of this. And when we look today along service buses, we've been addressing, particularly through our V4, it's our latest release, an even simpler way to connect. More and more of our clients, like Ben, with Joy Global, have said we have smart instruments, we have smart systems, even other systems that they're bringing in important data that they want to have an interplay, to have a connection with Meridium, and being able to connect in a simple way, knowing in the past maybe a one-to-one, Ben, but today many-to-many, to look for correlations, to look at the connectivity that they need to make decisions, to bring together the right information to the right people to be able to make the right decisions. So we've worked on much more in the recent years of trying to simplify those connections and recognizing there are many connections, not just a set few.
I see. Ben, how is Joy using Meridium in that regard? Are you able to do the connectivity that you need to accomplish your mission?
Yeah, Paula, for us, as you can imagine, quite a lot of different machines on the ground. We have to link to the customers' networks to get access to a lot of this data. So what was quite important for us is to be able to not just get the machine data, but also get their maintenance data. We also link into some of their other systems, environmental health and safety systems, their pumping, their ventilation systems. So all of these things really require a different method for us to connect, gather, and then analyze this data. A lot of it supported from a Meridium side, whereby we can bring this data together. But then we also do on our own quite extensive analytics and databases where we gather this data today.
Excellent. Excuse me. Intelligent asset strategies is a focus for Meridium. What is an intelligent asset strategy, Mike, and what role do they play in industrial Internet of Things?
So good question. When I think about asset strategies, we've had that in industry for many, many years. I have an industrial background. And so we would think of an asset strategy being more of a proactive way that you taking the history or design of an asset, the history, and we talked about aging workforce, the knowledge that's in our workforce today of how do we institutionalize that and how do we place that within a strategy. Then connecting in all of the machine data as a part of this, all of our benchmarking, the other things into one place, a repository that then can drive actions, and then in a continuous loop, learn and improve and modify to be able to optimize that. So we think of all of that from the very beginning of design to the establishment of it, to the judgment that goes in it. Risk mitigation is a key part of that in terms of what does, for instance, a Joy Global count as most important to their organization, as people typically think about environmental health and safety, and think about availability of the asset, and think of cost of the asset, and how to optimize that within a strategy. So rather than reactive, we always talk about we live in a very reactive world where in some cases we even reward the firefighters, is what do we do on a proactive way to establish it up front, how we want that asset to perform. And I guess one other important point is that when we look at an asset strategy, we think of an asset as performing an intended function, not from just a reliability, but from a business outcome. Mm-hmm. So when Ben's looking at this from his company, he has very defined, established business outcomes. He's looking for those assets either alone or in a system to accomplish. And that's very much what Meridium has as its core to be able to drive that establishment, and then the plan, do, check, act, and a continuous loop of improvement.
Okay. Ben, can you share with us how Joy Global is utilizing intelligent asset strategies?
Yeah, and I think Mike explained it quite well. What we would do there is use your current asset strategies, define, okay, from a customer's point of view, mine operator's point of view, what availability does he really need to have to drive either cost, production, or safety? So based on that, we're then able to use that strategy, but combine it with live data. So now we would call it, it becomes a dynamic strategy. It's not just dead and you do the maintenance every time you have to do the same thing. What you have the ability to do now is based on how hard the machines have been working, based on what they need. Is it more oil? Is it new filters? Dynamically adjust that maintenance schedule. We're then able to also come up with what does a maintenance schedule look like if you want 97% availability versus 90 or 85. Depending on the needs in your operation, you can adjust that on the fly, which is extremely powerful to manage cost versus production requirements.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that you're adding the word dynamic there is very important because this is certainly not a static situation at all. You need to be constantly revising it.
And Paul, if I could just add, to build on Ben's comment, when we think of those strategies and the execution of those strategies in more of a, I would say, analytics way, in the past we would try to determine what happened. Today, yes, we still look at what happened, but how do we predict and prevent in the future? And what kind of activities, actions, mitigating, type conditions or parameters we need to put in place to make sure that those kind of events don't occur in the future. And I think that's a big change of where we're going.
Okay, I think that adds a lot of value.
And also, Paula, if I can add to that, we've had historically our offering, for instance, would be lifecycle management based, right? So you would replace parts as needed to make sure that you have the required uptime. What we do these days is that has now transformed into what we call a performance lifecycle management contract. So performance now isn't just supplying a part at the right time anymore. It's making sure you get the right availability, but making sure also that from a mine point of view, not just a machine point of view, that they have the required utilization to actually use the piece of equipment. Mm-hmm. So very important that you're able to close the loop. It's good to have the machine, but you also have to use it when you have it available.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, I believe that we've reached a point in our industrial maturity, if you will, where the value of the data generated by the software solutions such as Meridium is more valuable over the lifetime of the asset than the asset itself. First, I'd like to ask you both whether you agree with this statement, and why is that?
Ben, would you like to take one first?
Thanks, Paula. It's a very interesting one. What you do find when you build out these strategies, you've got a lot of data in the back end. You're able to understand your machines and the mine's operations extremely well. So when we say now this becomes more important or valuable even than the asset itself, that comes in from leveraging that across your fleet or across multiple mine operations. So what you learn and what you optimize in one point, you have the ability to deploy that to the others, which is normally from a deployment, from an implementation point of view, very difficult. Now you've got the systems and processes to drive that with. So again, from a specific asset point of view, very true. You're able to push that out to a number of assets.
Yeah, and if I could just comment on that too. So when I think about the value of the data, and we were sharing a little bit of this prior to our discussion today, is how many times, if we would look back over history, how knowing one piece of data, just one piece of data, would have prevented a significant catastrophic loss, could be impacting health or safety, environment in terms of our licensed operates to our communities. It could also be from a customer delivery or a commitment that we've made. So when I think about return on investment, when we talk about whether it's software or solutions or equipment or anything, it's around a business outcome, a balanced scorecard business outcome, and how at the end of the day does that strategy? How does that whole look at the data coming back and the analytics on the data allow us to make better decisions to prevent those kind of catastrophic incidents that in one case, almost one case, you think of a process safety incident, will dwarf anything that you've paid. And even in some cases have destroyed companies through reputational damage, that they're never the same as a result of an accident that's taken place. Certainly in human impact of individuals affected by safety, they'll never be the same, or their families won't.
Thank you, Mike. We've been speaking with Mike Matlock and Ben Snyman this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Appreciate it, Paula.